So we continue to keep an eye on Hurricane Dorian, which has just been upgraded to a Category 4 storm as it heads toward Florida. And that storm has already had one consequence in Washington, D.C. The House Judiciary Committee has canceled its plans to come back early from the summer recess to work on a package of gun control legislation, a plan they had announced earlier in the month in the wake of mass shootings in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. The committee will now have to squeeze in any new gun legislation along everything else that they have on their plate when the full House returns September 9th. And this is, of course, the same committee that's been asking for documents and testimony in an ongoing inquiry into whether to recommend impeaching the president. And since they left for summer break, the list of things they may need to consider has just been getting longer and longer. I mean, consider for a moment the week that Donald Trump has had, just this one past week. It started with his erratic, largely incoherent performance at the G7 conference in France. There was the moment when Trump was asked if he attended the meeting at the G7 that was about climate change. He responded by saying it hadn't happened yet and it was going to be next. It, in fact, had just happened and he wasn't there. Then the White House press secretary put out a formal statement explaining that the reason Trump had not gone to the climate session was because instead he was having bilateral meetings with the leaders of India and Germany. Well, here's a picture of a climate meeting. There's the leader of Germany. There's the leader of India. There is Trump's empty chair. Trump did not skip the climate meeting so that he could meet with them. They were at the meeting and he wasn't there. Then there was this worrying exchange.
Any second thoughts on escalating the trade war with China?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Second thoughts?
Might as well.
You have second thoughts about escalating the war with China?
I have second thoughts about everything.
Yeah, sure. I have second thoughts about everything. Trump's top economic advisors had to go on TV almost immediately to say the president hadn't heard the question or actually had meant the opposite of what you actually heard. Also, there was this.
China called last night our top trade people and said, let's get back to the table.
Mr. President, I asked you, could you tell us a little bit more about the call you referred to? When will the next round of negotiations with China start?
We've gotten 2 calls and very, very good calls, very productive calls.
Okay, so this is where the deep voice narrator comes in and says, in fact, there were no calls. From CNN today, quote, aides privately conceded the phone calls Trump described didn't happen the way he said they did. Instead, 2 officials said Trump was eager to project optimism that might boost markets and conflated comments from China's vice premier with direct communication from the Chinese. Which honestly, if the president of the United States lied about phone calls with China in order to boost the markets, that seems pretty bad. But it's probably better than him just making up phone calls or maybe having said calls take place only in his mind. I don't know, pick your poison. Speaking of White House aides cleaning up weird pronouncements and lies from the president, here was one headline this week. White House clarifies that Melania Trump has not met Kim Jong-un. So Trump just volunteered to reporters apropos of nothing, quote, the First Lady has gotten to know Kim Jong-un, and I think she would agree with me. He is a man with a country that has tremendous potential. Quote, as Trump mentioned his wife, a camera cut to Melania in the audience, who cocked her head slightly and looked somewhat quizzically at the president. Several hours later, as the president and First Lady flew back to Washington, the White House press secretary issued a statement, quote, while the First Lady hasn't met Kim Jong-un, the president feels like she's gotten to know him. Okay. And then, of course, Trump wrapped up the G7 by using his presidential podium to do a giant infomercial for one of his golf clubs and why it would be the perfect place to hold the next G7, which he wants to turn back into the G8 by inviting Vladimir Putin.
With Doral, we have a series of magnificent buildings. We call them bungalows. They each hold from 50 to 70 very luxurious rooms with magnificent views. We have incredible conference rooms, incredible restaurants. It's like such a natural. And we have many hundreds of acres so that in terms of parking, in terms of all of the things that you need, the ballrooms are among the biggest in Florida and the best.
I mean, we have the biggest ballrooms in Florida. How could you not host the next gathering of world leaders there? I mean, you know, it's near the airport. There are things we call bungalows. Putin would be so comfortable there. Unless you think that was just a wildly inappropriate sales pitch or an off-the-cuff Trump thought, the official White House Twitter feed captioned those comments as an official announcement. Quote, President Donald Trump shares the location of the next G7 summit hosted by the United States. which would be fantastically unconstitutional if the president were to force foreign leaders to put money directly into his pocket by making them stay at his own hotel. The rest of the week brought news that Donald Trump has ordered his subordinates to begin seizing private land and even break the law if they have to in order to get his border wall built, and that he will pardon them afterwards if they get into trouble. And the news that his administration is ordering the deportation of sick children receiving life-saving medical care in the United States. And we will have more on that later in the show. Now, just today, Trump issued this strange and confounding tweet that appears to contain a U.S. government satellite image of a damaged Iranian rocket launch site. There has been no explanation from the White House, but experts tell NBC News it is likely a classified image. NBC's Andrea Mitchell reported today, quote, legally, the president has the authority to declassify what he wants. But that does not answer the question of why he did and whether it is wise. Outside experts are dumbfounded. Asked by reporters this evening where the photo came from, Trump said, quote, you'll have to figure that one out yourself. Okay. Now, I know every week is clown car full of crazy these days. And it's easy for it all to kind of start feeling like background noise, like really, really unsettling background noise. But if Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee have said that some of the things that Trump has done just this past week, like his move to hold the next G7 at his golf club and his offer of pardons to administration officials who break the law to build his border wall, that some of those things ought to be part of their investigation into whether to recommend impeachment. The number of House Democrats in favor of an impeachment inquiry keeps steadily rising. It is now 134 lawmakers, well over half of the Democratic caucus. And consider this latest headline from the great Dahlia Lithwick, legal correspondent at Slate. Let's compare Donald Trump's week, she writes, to the impeachment articles brought against Richard Nixon, Clinton, and Johnson. Quote, if one were to consider the articles of impeachment against the three sitting presidents who have historically faced impeachment proceedings, not only has Trump clearly achieved all of them, he actually now achieves most of them in under a week. So here's the question. If the House Judiciary Committee has to investigate all of the president's potentially impeachable offenses before it can recommend impeachment, and the president keeps committing new potentially impeachable offenses every week, how does this investigation ever end? Joining us now is a member of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island. Great to have you with us tonight, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So we're at 134 House Democrats now favoring impeachment. That's well over half of the caucus. Does that now reach the threshold where leadership agrees with those of you who want to proceed toward an impeachment, a formal impeachment? Does that mean that House leadership is now on board?
Well, obviously, an increasing number of the members of the Democratic caucus have come out in support of the Judiciary Committee proceedings. I think the chairman has made it very clear in the last pleading that was filed in court that we are in the midst of a proceeding as to whether or not we will recommend to the full House articles of impeachment against the president. So we're in the midst of this. It require us to continue to bring witnesses before the committee to seek the production of documents so that we will be able to make a recommendation to the full House, the chairman said, by the end of this year. As you point out, every week or every day it feels as if there are additional things that require examination. Those will be added to the judiciary agenda, and we'll look at those things. But there will come a point, I presume, that we will have enough to make a determination as to whether or not articles of impeachment should be filed. Certainly the president shouldn't benefit by continuing to commit impeachable offenses and preventing us from ever taking action. So I think there will come a point when the Judiciary Committee will make a judgment based on the evidence presented to the committee and the witnesses we've heard from and the documents we've reviewed as to whether or not we recommend to the full House articles of impeachment against the president.
But do those who now support proceeding toward impeachment include the Speaker?
Well, I would never presume to speak for the Speaker. I think she's made it very clear that she believes the president must be held accountable, that no one is above the law, and that we should continue the robust oversight of the committee, and that's what the Judiciary Committee is doing.
Yep.
Obviously, the Speaker will weigh in as to whether or not we ultimately take up articles of impeachment before the committee are on the floor, but our work remains. We need to continue to bring witnesses before the committee, litigate, because the president has directed witnesses not to come, to not produce documents. So we are litigating these things to be sure we get the evidence we need to make informed judgments.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the potential articles or the potential things that you will investigate. We now have Donald Trump pushing to use his private club as a hosting site for the G7, which, by the way, would put global leaders in Florida at the height of hurricane season, which doesn't sound quite safe or wise. Is that one of the things that you believe should be investigated as a potential article of impeachment, aside from the emoluments clause issue?
Yeah, I mean, this is one more way that this president is attempting to enrich himself, his family, and his real estate empire by using the office of the presidency. This is a terrible abuse of power. It's an abuse of his office. It's seeking gain from being president of the United States, which is, we've never seen this before. This is a president who sees this as a money-making enterprise, as do members of his family. That is not what the presidency is for. And to require foreign leaders to participate in this summit only by paying Donald Trump and his organization would be completely inappropriate, likely illegal, and certainly a violation of the Emoluments Clause. So that will be added to the list, I'm sure, of the ways that this administration and this president has enriched himself that the Judiciary Committee will review. We want to be sure that when the President of the United States or any elected official is acting, they're acting in the best interest of the American people, not because there's some financial gain that they're getting or their company or their family's getting. It violates a number of conflict of interest prohibitions. It certainly violates the Emoluments Clause in the Constitution. But this is just one more example of the president who's using this office as a money-making enterprise.
Yeah, indeed. We didn't even get to the Attorney General paying him to throw his holiday party there, but we can do that another time. Absolutely. Congressman David Cicilline, member of the House Judiciary Committee, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. All right. And up next, right here tonight, a member of Congress who is fighting to keep one of the young people in America who the Trump administration wants to kick out, even though it will likely mean that she will die. That is next. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.